Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Scoliosis Dialogues. My name is Jaysson Brooks. I am one of the staff pediatric orthopedic surgeons at the Scottish Rite Hospital for Children in Dallas, Texas. I am so excited to be here with my friend and colleague, Dr. Ryan Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Jaysson. Appreciate you having me as one of the hosts today. I'm Ryan Fitzgerald of the Children's Orthopedic and Scoliosis Surgery Associates in St. Petersburg, Florida. We're an affiliate with Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital.
We have a great episode today where we're going to be talking with the last SRS Traveling Fellowship group that actually went on the Traveling Fellowship before the pandemic took place. And so we're excited to have Dr. George Thompson, who really needs no introduction at all. He's had a storied career for over the past 40 years, and his accomplishments include being a president of the SRS, a president of POSNA, going on traveling fellowships of his own with multiple societies, being a Hune Award winner, being on the POSNA board of directors, receiving the SRS Lifetime Achievement Award, as well as being the medical director of the Shrine Hospital System, and running the nationwide children's hospital system, particularly their spine division for a number of years. Dr. Thompson's been a visiting professor, a guest lecturer over 150 times. He has over 190 peer-reviewed articles. So he was just the perfect person to be the senior traveling fellow that occurred in 2019. And as one of the junior traveling fellows, we have Dr. John Caridi, who completed a neurosurgery residency at the University of Maryland, also known as Shock Trauma Hospital. And then he went on to complete an orthopedic spine fellowship at the Hospital for Special Surgery. And then he received additional training in minimally invasive spine surgery at the Schoen Clinic in Munich, Germany. He is currently the chief of the spine division for the neurosurgery department at the University of Texas in Houston.
I also have the honor of speaking with Dr. Addisu Mesfin, who is the director of the Louis A. Goldstein Spine Surgery Fellowship and the division chief of spine surgery and professor of orthopedic surgery, neurosurgery, biomedical engineering, and public health at the University of Rochester. He completed his orthopedic residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital, where he completed an adult and pediatric spine fellowship at WashU with Dr. Lenke and Dr. Bridwell. And then finally, we have the honor of speaking with Dr. Gregory Mundis. He's the co-director of the San Diego Spine Fellowship and an active member of the Global Spine Outreach Group. He completed an orthopedic residency at the University of Oklahoma and later completed an adult and pediatric spine fellowship at the San Diego Spine Fellowship Program.
So after going through those wonderful introductions of everyone, you all seem like super accomplished in your careers. Even before you went on this traveling fellowship, why did you think a traveling fellowship was important to add to your list of academic achievements? Maybe I'll start with you first, John.
So I really wanted to do it more because, number one, I wanted to get more involved with the SRS, and I felt that this was a great way to get involved. The other thing I wanted to do was build some camaraderie with people in my peer group, which I think this was an amazing opportunity to do that. The other thing is it's nice to read about what people do, and it's nice to see them at meetings and talk to them, but it's different when you're at their institution and you're talking to them one-on-one. It's kind of the difference between going to an art gallery and looking at paintings versus going to an artist studio and talking to them about the method of how they came up with a lot of this creativity and how they did all of these things. And to me, that was really eye-opening and probably the part of the fellowship that I really enjoyed the most.
That's awesome. How about you, Addisu? What made you decide that this traveling fellowship was the next best step in your career?
When I was in a residency, one of my attendings, Cal Kabesh, had completed the traveling fellowship, and I remember talking to him and learning about how great of an experience it was, and it was always on one of my things to do. And I've been fortunate to have done other traveling fellowships. I'm a big fan of the opportunity to make new friends, to travel to centers of excellence and learn how they're doing it in different countries, and also learning from them and bringing those skills back to my patients, and also broadening some of my research opportunities or our research opportunities as a SRS members, because it's an international organization. So all these things led me to apply for this, and it was a great experience visiting a lot of new countries that SRS fellows have not gone to, and also learning from Dr. Thompson, who's a godfather. He had a wealth of experience. So all these things, along with my co-fellows, was a great opportunity that I highly recommend for anybody thinking about it.
Dr. Mundis.
So the Traveling Fellowship presents numerous different opportunities, and they range from social interactions to academic interactions, and in a lot of ways interpersonal. With our busy lives, it's really hard to get to know people sometimes because you're constantly seeing people for 30 minutes or an hour. But when you do a traveling fellowship, you actually get dedicated time with some of the thought leaders in the field, and you get to know them personally. You get to know their history, you get to know their journey. And I'll tell you, the richness that comes from that is, next to none when it comes to what we're able to do sort of just in our daily lives.
Dr. Thompson, can you tell us how you were selected as the Senior Traveling Fellow, and how the host sites are selected as well in deciding where the fellowship's going to go?
Well, I hate to say this, but I was kind of trapped into being the Senior Fellowship. I had a phone call from the president saying, would you be interested in being considered? And I said, oh, yeah, it would be fine. And then I think it was a day or two later at the academy, I got Tressa came up to me and said, congratulations, you're the Senior Fellow. And that was fine. Listen, I've been involved with traveling fellowships my entire career. I was a North American Traveling Fellow very early on. And then we have hosted the EPOS, the SRS, a lot of other traveling fellowships. So I'm very used to doing it, and I have great respect for it. As I told the guys when we left, the people we're going to meet aren't going to teach you a whole lot, and you're not going to teach them a whole lot. But what's going to really be the outcome of the traveling fellowship is the exposure. And this is what Greg was just referring to. Getting to know these really prominent people who become your friends, your resources later on, and that builds lifelong friendships and relationships. And I think that's the whole key for all of this. And Greg, John, I think you guys would agree with that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that was the main thing. Now, how did I select all these places? Well, the first thing is I had a list of where people had been before. And we were starting to see some duplications show up. And I tried, or at least I thought about, at this time, I want to try and choose sites no one has been to before. I want it to be really unique. That's how all the people I chose had not been hosts before. I know Muharrem Yazici had been involved, but not in his town of Ankara. He had actually gone to Istanbul to be part of the group there. And so I really insisted that we go to Ankara in that particular location. I knew that we'd never been to India, and so I really wanted to go there, and we'd never been to Israel. And so those are why those places were chosen as well. So it was really just trying to get new faces and new places involved. It's not particularly hard. It was just using people that I know around the world and just looking to see where we hadn't been is how it all happened.
So in preparing for this and going on the SRS website, I was able to see that the minimums are that you have to be an SRS active or a candidate member in good standing. You must be under 45 years old at the time of application. And the members have to be residing in North America in order to apply. Are there any other characteristics that you guys are looking for in a traveling fellow? What would you consider to be the minimums? And how much did you have to drop them to take Dr. Mundis?
Well, it was we got very, very low when we took Greg. It was bottom of the barrel, I have to tell you. We even looked for volunteers. We couldn't find any, but no, that's not true at all. The thing is, as a senior fellow, I had nothing to say about who the traveling fellows would be. So I'm not really the one to answer the question. But I can tell you how, at least in my exposure over my entire career with traveling fellowships, I try to choose the most academically qualified. I wanted to send our very best. When I'm looking at my own residents and fellows and people who I've known, I wanted to send our best out to the rest of the world so they can see what we're doing. And I think those people who were well on their way to a successful academic career who would benefit by this exposure would be the criteria that I would be looking for if I was in charge of it. Now, I wasn't, but I bet my criteria that I just outlined are what everybody else was thinking too, because everybody who went on the traveling fellowship, at least the three guys, with the exception of Greg, were really, really qualified people.
When you guys decided that you wanted to go on this traveling fellowship and be gone from your clinical practice for 3 weeks, were your department chairs and colleagues high-fiving you and saying, hey, go for it? Or was it a little bit more painful than that? Like, for those that are potentially looking at applying for one of these traveling fellowships, how do you make it less onerous for the colleagues that you're going to be leaving, that are going to have to pick up your call, and for like your nurses who are going to have to be taking care of everything while you're gone? Like, how did you coordinate all that so that you could go in this amazing experience?
Well, my chairman at the time was a skull-based surgeon, so he had never heard of SRS, and so it was a little bit of a struggle to convince him that this is something that's really worthwhile in doing. But ultimately, he came around. My colleagues who understood what this meant, they were more than happy to accommodate taking over call, taking care of patients. We set up beforehand, my nurse practitioner, myself in my office, how we were going to handle any urgent cases, and explaining to patients like where I'm going to be for a month and why I can't operate on them for potentially 3 months when I'm seeing them in the office at first time. Having all of that in tune was a little distressing initially, but ultimately worked out really well.
Yeah, and the one thing too is you're aware that you're going to be a traveling fellow about 6 months ahead. So you definitely have that time to plan call schedules and blocking clinics and making sure that around that time you're not doing any complicated cases that may bounce back. Although I think I did have some, even a minor patient bounce back at one point, but I have good partners that covered for me. Another thing, John mentioned, his chair was a skull base, and from the ortho standpoint, I was fortunate to have a chair who's also an SRS member, and he actually was very supportive of this. But even if my chair was a arthroplasty surgeon, I think emphasizing the brand of the SRS and how prestigious of an opportunity this is, and how, more importantly, we can bring new techniques and other research questions back to our center, I think maybe a good way to kind of sell that to some leadership who may not be aware of SRS or what this means.
Can you guys do us a favor and run us through the sites you visited? And if each of you want to take on one of the sites you visited and just give a little bit more detail about what you did there, not only from an academic standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint, I think that would give an insight to our listeners to what that experience is really like.
Sure. I guess I'll go first. The first spot that we visited was Ghana. And so we visited Dr. Bawachi, who was one of my mentors at HSS when I was a fellow. That was a really special place to be because he's basically built that hospital himself from the ground up. Touring his facilities and looking at all of the challenges that he's had to build everything that he's built was pretty amazing. And then to have this population that he has, basically kids from all over Africa, and seeing what he's able to do for them, that was really amazing. And then for him to still be involved with doing research from a standpoint of these really severe curves is pretty amazing. Culturally, just being with him and his family was also quite amazing. He took us to his beach house and had a pretty traditional meal, and his wife was an amazing host for us and really helped us feel at home while we were over there. So I mean, that was a special place.
So it sounds like Ghana was a great experience. Addisu, could you tell us a little bit about visiting Dr. Yazici?
Ankara was also a new site for SRS Traveling Fellows, and we were hosted by just so generously by Dr. Yazici. It's I can't even put it in words, but he really took care of us. We had a chance to visit really one of the premier hospitals in Turkey, Hacettepe University Hospital, and there we were able to participate in surgeries. We were able to observe a combination of adult and pediatric deformities. And he actually hosted us at his house. He had just a great spread of breakfast that his wife had prepared, and just really took care of us. And also just kind of learning how he was able to build a very busy clinical practice in addition to a very nuanced clinical and basic science research apparatus that he's been able to develop over his career. And he really ran research experiences and clinical experiences with us when we're actually taking a minivan down to Cappadocia to do these hot air balloon trips that he had organized. And so, about a 2-hour drive from Ankara, but it was impressive just learning from what he has been able to do. And as you all know, he was just the recent president of SRS, and it was just a great experience. And I echo what John had just mentioned earlier too. Ghana was an amazing experience as well. That was also the first time that the SRS fellows have gone there.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience in Israel as well?
Sure. So Israel, we were hosted there by Dr. Dror Ovadia, and he's practices at the Tel Aviv Medical Center, the Dana Children's Hospital. So it was definitely also another one of the first times the fellows have been to Israel and Tel Aviv. We're really a lot of traveling fellowship is a cultural experience. So we were able to visit the city of Tel Aviv, have dinner on the Mediterranean Sea there, and also visit the hospital center, learn the research they were doing, also participate in cases with them. And the next day, he actually took us to, or a few days later, he took us to Jerusalem. And during these hour-long drives, again, as I mentioned earlier with Turkey, these are the times we actually can kind of learn and discuss cases and kind of also learn some of the cultural nuances there. So that was also a great site, and we definitely had a good learning experience there.
Well, I think, the reason I chose Dror Ovadia to be our host in Israel, and he's a guy I've known for a long time, and probably the major pediatric spine surgeon in Israel. He was so honored that we selected him. I mean, he still tells me about it, even 2 years later, every time I see him, how honored he was that he was selected. And I think we had a fantastic time there.
Hey, Dror probably, interestingly, more than any other individual, has been someone that's kept in touch with me. He has texted me on holidays, even just as soon as this New Year. He said, "Happy New Year."
I got one too.
That even here, like 2 years later, he's still thinking about us. Like, that's a random text, like it was meaningful to him, and it was equally meaningful to us to be in that region of the world, which is a little bit, sketchy as far as travel, et cetera. And to be able to go there and to see his facility, we operated in an area that was like built for operating during war. Like, we were like,
yeah,
how far underground were we? Like, this place operates.
We were way underground. It was bomb proof, as I recall.
So it's cool.
Yeah. And you guys may remember that Dror's part-time job before he got a little bit older he was a helicopter pilot in the Israeli Air Force, and he did that for years. He was always a doctor at the university, but he also was in the military at the same time.
And Dr. Mundis, can you go ahead and go over what your experience in India was?
India was honestly, it was fascinating. It was one of the quicker trips right at the tail end of it, and probably right off the bat, they welcomed us in a beautiful way. They were extremely gracious hosts. Dr. Rajasekharan is, modern terms, is a baller. I mean, that guy he's unbelievable. And he has built a pretty phenomenal program. His family has built this whole hospital, and they're completely responsible for everything within it. It's a marvel to be there and to kind of think through what the last couple generations of his family have done to have such a lasting impact in a community that desperately needs them. So like seeing what that was pretty awesome. On top of that, his like academic accomplishments and the story he tells as it relates to the association of infection and oftentimes subclinical infection with degenerative disc disease was also really eye-opening. And I think for sure a story that's not told loud enough in our academic circles. And then finally, clinically, like, talk about impressive. I mean, like these guys, I forget, it was 6 or 7 like major spine cases that were done between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. and done. Like, I mean, closed and out. It was unbelievable. And in their ORs, they have all the tech too, which is cool, right? They have O-arms and navigation and all this other stuff. And it was a little bit of this, this culturally, you think, I'm going to India, there's poverty, there's this, there's that, and so you go outside and there's people that clearly have nothing. And when they come there, they get care that is like at the upper 3% of like US standards, So
yeah, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were putting on a 150 bed wing when we were there. And I think their main hospital was 200, 250 when we were there visiting.
They were double almost.
And it's only orthopedics and trauma. That's all it was. I mean, it was amazing.
Wow.
And the thing is, they figure out ways to get people they get paid for what they do and they help people. It was an amazing organization. I've known Dr. Roger Scarum for a long time through CCOT, and that's why I chose him. But I didn't think people really knew or appreciated what all was going on in India, and nor did I, for that matter, to be perfectly honest. And
wow,
it was truly amazing. It was as modern as you could get, and the pathology was unbelievable, just unbelievable.
So, John, we are fortunate to have our first neurosurgeon now serve as our SRS president. You being a neurosurgeon yourself, were you able to get any insights into how neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons who operate on the spine kind of interact at a lot of the hospitals that you all visited? Is it still kind of segregated into neurosurgery versus ortho, or have they kind of come together in the middle, like what is happening at many centers across the United States?
To me, it felt like it was more integrated, particularly so in Ghana, Dr. Bowachi would have his neurosurgery colleagues participate in some of his cases and seemed to be pretty well in tune with the local neurosurgery community. We didn't see any of the neurosurgeons in Israel. I think it was essentially the divide was in pediatrics was the spine. So I think that none of the pediatric neurosurgeons participated in any of the cases that we saw, but we did talk to Dror about the fact that for things like tethered cords and diastems and things like that, that he does frequently involve his neurosurgery colleagues. So it did seem much more integrated. Turkey, pretty similarly. In India, it was essentially an all orthopedic hospital, so trauma and spine. So we didn't see too much of the neurosurgery side in India. I know that they do a little bit more integration there as well. So I feel that spine is becoming much more of its own specialty almost at this point. And however you arrive to it through ortho or through neuro, you end up all back at the same place.
So we also know that the SRS Traveling Fellowship typically ends at the SRS annual meeting. What is the significance of that from your perspective now that you've been through that fellowship?
Yeah, like I thought it was perfectly in sync with the momentum of everything that you're doing, right? You just spent 3 weeks with the 4 of us were basically strangers, and then all of a sudden at the end of it, you're like family, right? And the tail end of it was pretty special to be able to, you got all this energy and you got all this like excitement from what you did. And then you get to go at the annual meeting and share it with the membership there. It's kind of a special moment, and it works out beautifully because, you want the next group of young surgeons to be super excited about doing something like this. And I'll tell you, you're probably never more excited than when you come back from that trip. It's a little hard, obviously, because you're away from your family, so that's tough. But I will tell you, like, the timing of it is perfect at the tail end of it.
And I would agree with that. And we had our choice. We could either end at IMAST or we could end at the SRS meeting. And I think the SRS is the meeting where it should happen. It's our number one meeting per year, and having the traveling fellows there to talk immediately about their experience was by far the best way to end the traveling fellowship.
And Greg, you gave us a great, segue, especially the younger generations of surgeons, that catchphrase work-life balance is kind of often, bandied around. And when you're talking about being gone from your family for 3 weeks, certainly you have a 6-month lead-up time to prepare them before the fellowship. But what was the reality of what being away was like for your family? And do you have any tips for surgeons who might be thinking about going on a traveling fellowship and how to best make that transition for their family as enjoyable as possible?
Well, first of all, don't apply unless your family's already signed off on it. This is a big deal. So get your family to sign off first and then apply, because if you do get selected, you should not say no. Like that would be that's a bad move. Okay.
Yeah, you shouldn't apply. What you said at the beginning, Greg, don't apply unless you're willing to commit.
Yeah. So that's number one. So in preparation for that, though, my wife understands my academic drive. She understands also, she understands it all. She's amazing. And it took us a while to come to grips with that this was a good idea. Now, I will tell you, in hindsight, it was a phenomenal idea, even for my family. And this is where it gets a little bit weird, because I had never taken that kind of time away from my practice. I was in practice probably about 10 years when I went on my traveling fellowship. And so I'd never taken time off like that. But it was a pause in my life. And I think it came at the right time because I really needed a pause. And I actually ended up fasting all television and movies. Like, I did nothing. I did zero outside of posting on social media for the fellowship. I did zero online, and I did zero with television, etc. And my thought was I just kind of wanted to focus more on my family in those quiet times. And I'll tell you, like, it ended up being like one of the most meaningful moments, because when I came home, I had such a deep appreciation for every one of my kids and for my wife. And I think in the end, it actually worked. It worked out better than I could have ever expected. So I think planning some of that into it is important. Make sure you get your family to buy into it before you apply, so that if you do get it, that you're in good standing, and then make good decisions while you're traveling. Because I'll tell you, we can really work to your benefit.
Mine's pretty easy because it's just me and my wife. We don't have any kids, and she was in the middle of doing her executive MBA. So me being gone and out of her hair was probably good.
Perfect timing.
I love it.
So I have 2 young kids, and my wife at that point was a practicing physician. So again, having that 6-month lead up was important to plan around it. Have done other traveling fellowships, so at least my family was kind of used to what this involves. And I think one of them was actually 4 or 5 weeks. So at least this one being 3 weeks was kind of even easier for my family. So, but it's definitely something you have to get buy-in from, partners, family, and, the great thing with, FaceTime, all these technologies, you can still, even though you're across the world, you can still talk to your kids and family.
Addisu, do you have, like, I know, like, a lot of people run, they try to do 3 Ironmans in their life. Like, are you going for like a record of how many traveling fellowships? Like, so what's your limit here?
I've been awarded 4, so I think I'm done.
Sounds good.
I will say, Ryan or Jaysson, I was a North American traveling fellow when it was 6 weeks long. And that was way too long, I can tell you. 3 weeks is about right. And I think families can tolerate that. But 6 weeks, I had a couple of sobbing phone calls about the kids are driving her crazy and stuff. But our kids were younger. I would have been in practice 6 months when I left for 6 weeks. And so was a different time. I still look back on that as one of the highlights of my career. The people I met, the people I got to know, and the people who then maintained friendships with for 20, 30, 40 years was enormous. Just enormous is all I can say about it. It was truly a wonderful experience, and one that helped me become who I am today.
And I think many people may view the Traveling Fellowship as a great opportunity to, travel, obviously, and take group pictures in foreign lands. However, like looking at your guys' Instagram feed, it seemed like it was constant movement, maybe some sleepless nights and on overnight flights, those sorts of things. What is the reality of it? And what do you think was the number one thing each of you individually took away from this experience?
I mean, the reality of it is that it is very busy. It's a different type of busy than being in clinical practice where you're always worried about your patients and things like that. It's more of a relaxed, so to speak, tiredness, where even though you're on an overnight flight in a narrow seat, it's not extremely stressful. We're still young enough to remember all the sleepless nights of residency.
And so obviously with that though, it kind of being a little bit of a relaxed stress, I think that this experience has to be one of the most unique ones that you guys have had in training or in practice. So what was your main takeaway? What was the thing that you took out of this as like the number one take home that either changed your practice or changed your view on taking care of patients or just in life in general?
So, I'll take that one. From my perspective, it's really the understanding that we all really speak the same language in regards to deformity, right? So whether you're in Israel, whether you're in Ghana or India or Turkey, we're looking at the similar images. Granted, there's a lot more complex cases at some of these higher tertiary referral centers than we may see back home, but you're still thinking the same way, and you may be in a different culture than back in the U.S., but it's still that camaraderie and that and collegiality is there, and these are really senior individuals that that are hosting us, and to be able to send them an email, to be able to kind of pick their brains on different things, that would it's less of a burden to do that when you've been to their house, when you've visited them, than if you just meet them at a meeting and just kind of run into them.
One of the things I was really impressed with is everywhere we went, with the notable exception of Istanbul, the facilities were not quite the same as they are in the US. They had a lot, older equipment, and, particularly in Ghana, they were using a lot of donated stuff, but yet they still were able to really accomplish so much. They perform these really complicated surgeries, still create these great research programs. To me, it was that ingenuity and the fact that they could always get things done that really stuck with me, and I think that helped me going forward in my own practice and in my own research program, trying to work through these little kinks, because I think they set an amazing example for us.
This has been absolutely amazing, guys. We are so excited that maybe we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the coronavirus. At least we have the vaccine now, and we're very excited that the SRS is starting back up the Traveling Fellowship, because we know there's another group of stellar spine surgeons who are going to be learning new techniques across the world. And we just really want to thank Dr. Mundis, Dr. Caridi, Dr. Mesfin, and Dr. Thompson for your time and just sharing your experiences here. You all were the last traveling fellowship before the pandemic shut everything down. And we're hoping that this next round of SRS Fellows will be able to come back and share their experiences also. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity, and for the SRS to organizing this, and thank you for interviewing us. And also, I'll throw it out there from my perspective. If anybody has any questions about it, feel free to send me an email or reach out. Thanks.
And likewise.
All right, Jaysson, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
thank you to everybody for joining us for this episode. We hope that it's insightful into what the SRS Traveling Fellowship is. We're excited to get it back off the ground with the pandemic hopefully coming to a close. Please visit srs.org to apply and learn more information about the Scoliosis Research Society Traveling Fellowship. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
The Scoliosis Research Society is a nonprofit professional organization made up of physicians and allied health personnel. Their primary focus is on providing continuing medical education for healthcare professionals and on funding and supporting research in spinal deformities. Please visit srs.org for further information.